How are you?
I'm all right.
Good morning. Make sure you check your homework and pay careful attention to the top part.
Okay.
I want you guys to make sure that you're paying very close attention to the top of this and double checking where it says that you're naming the opposite. Are both of your answers the same for all of those? Make sure you check very carefully on your homework. Okay? Good job. That's wonderful. Good.
I got 10 for number 1. 6 for 4. 9 for 7. 5 for 7.
1 and 1 10. How'd you get 5 9?
Oh,
I got 1 and 1 10 because it's right there. And then I got 5 12s.
on what number?
6.
Number
4 5.
I always started at.
I got 7. I think you're right because
yeah, I checked it because I did negative 10 for 1. Positive 5 for 2. Negative 20 for 3. Positive 30 for 4. And positive 10 for 5.
Yeah. And then for activity 4, I got 0.4. 1 for number 1, number 3,
Yep.
No, it's number 5.
Should I just skip over number 5?
Yep. Oh wait, I was just multiplying. Oh wait, for number 5 I got 9.
Okay.
And for 7,
Yeah, what y'all do?
yeah.
4.
Did you get 1 and 1 10 first?
Okay, you guys have about 30 seconds left to go over your homework. How we doing? How did we do on last night's homework? How did we do on it? Was it? Some of it was hard. Which part was hard?
The integers part, like on the negative.
On activity 1, activity 2, which activity?
Activity 1.
Okay. Can someone explain to Sierra what an opposite is when we're talking about integers? Sloan?
It
it's just the opposite of the number. Basically, you just put the opposite sign in front of it of actually what it is. Say it's a negative, then it would be the positive would be the opposite. Or if it's a positive, it would be a negative of that same number.
Okay. Exactly. Every integer has an opposite. So, for example, the opposite of positive 6 would be what, Sierra? It's not on your paper, honey.
Negatives.
Good job, negative 6. And were there any other ones that you had questions on? I heard some great talks about the distributed practice when you were talking about common denominators. I'm very proud of you guys for remembering that. Okay, guys, today we are actually going to look at ways that we use integers in real life. Can anyone think about, in real life, how we might use integers? What we've talked about? Elizabeth?
Maybe like when you're depositing or withdrawing money.
Exactly, when you're depositing or withdrawing money, which one of those would be a negative or a negative integer? Sloan?
Depositing.
Depositing. If I'm depositing money, what am I doing?
Putting money. Oh, I thought you were talking about money in your pocket.
That's positive. So if I'm withdrawing money, if I'm taking money out of my account, what's happening to my account?
That's a decrease.
It's negative, it's going down, it's decreasing. Can you think of any other real life situation that we might see integers? Sloan?
Temperatures.
Temperatures, that's right, temperatures. That's actually the first thing that we're going to look at today. Who's seen a thermometer? If you've seen a thermometer, you know that when we have temperature, everything above 0 is positive, okay? And it can only go down so far before we have to start talking about negative integers. So with temperature, it can drop to where before we have to start talking about negative integers? Who can tell me?
It has to drop below 0.
So it can drop to 0, and then everything below 0 is negative. So if you look up at the board, you see that we have a thermometer that's showing 10 degrees, we'll say Fahrenheit. If it's 10 degrees, it's cold, isn't it? So is that positive or negative?
Positive.
Okay, well, last night it got really cold, and it dropped to negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit. How far did it drop? Dylan?
14 degrees.
So you think it dropped 14 degrees? Would anyone else say that it dropped 10 degrees? Would anyone say it dropped 6 degrees?
No.
Why?
Because
Go ahead.
because it goes to -4, and I got a little confused in the beginning because I got 6 because it went to 4, but now that's a negative, so you go down even more.
Oops. Exactly. So if you look from 10 to 0, it's how far? What's the distance? 10. And from 0 to -4, it's how far?
4.
And when we actually add them together, that's what we're doing. We have 14. And we can actually see the same thing on a number line, except how is this different?
It's going
Left and right.
It's going left to right. So if you look, 0 is still kind of the dividing point. That's the starting place. And everything above 0 is
positive.
So everything to the right is positive, and that shows an increase. And everything to the left of 0, negative. Okay, so we can see that positive 10 is to the right of 0, and it's 10 away from 0. And we can see that -4 is to the left of 0, and it's how far from 0?
4.
Okay, and we can see that last night, if it went from 10 degrees above 0 to 4 degrees below 0, that it was a drop of 14 degrees, or -14 degrees. Fantastic. Okay, let's take a look at an example where somebody could make an easy error when they're looking at temperature. Your friend wants to know how the temperature changed from morning to afternoon. In the morning, it was -5 degrees.
That's cold.
Later that afternoon, the temperature was 22 degrees. What do we know about daytime? What happens as the sun comes out? It gets warmer. Okay. Well, your friend says that the temperature increased 17 degrees from morning to afternoon. Can you guys tell me what you think your friend might have done incorrectly? Elizabeth.
She subtracted 5.
Caitlin, I'm sorry.
It's okay. She subtracted 5 from 22.
She subtracted 5 from 22. And what else could she have done? So she did subtract 5 from 22, but that could mean that she started where? On the number line or on the thermometer. Sloan?
5.
at positive 5. Okay, so what we need to remember, so she definitely made an error, and what we need to remember is that the starting point is at 0. 22 degrees above 0 is how far from 0? 22, and negative 5 degrees is how far from 0?
5.
So to figure out, or to find out the total difference between this morning at negative 5 degrees and the temperature in the afternoon at 22 degrees, we kind of have to add, right? We add the actual distance from 0, so we get 27 degrees altogether. Good job. Okay, so the temperature increased 27 degrees from morning to afternoon. Okay. Okay, guys, we are actually going to do a think. What I want you to do is I want you to think for me. And I'm going to be calling on one of you. I'm going to pick a name. I want to know, in what direction do we move on a number line to show an increase? What direction will we move on a number line to show an increase? Sloan.
Right.
Very good. That's wonderful. Okay. Now I would like to know, in what direction do we move on a number line to show a decrease? What direction do we move on a number line to show a decrease? Kylie.
Left.
Left. Very good. Wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to look at another example, another real-life example. Has anyone ever been scuba diving before? Elizabeth, you've been scuba diving? You've been scuba diving also? Oh my goodness. Okay, well, this is a real-life example, and when we thought about the thermometer, we know that 0 is kind of our starting point, right? And when we go above 0, we're doing what? Positive or negative?
Positive.
We're increasing, it's positive. When we go below 0, it's negative. And you can also see that with the diver. At sea level is 0, but when he goes beneath the water or when he goes down below sea level, he's going where?
Down.
He's going down, so he's decreasing, and that would indicate negative integers. Okay, and you can see the same thing on a number line. So what if that diver went 50 feet below sea level? What integer would indicate where he's gone? Dylan?
Negative 50.
Negative 50. Could I show that on a number line?
Yes.
Because we know that 50 is how far away from 0? It's 50. And he's going below, so it's 50, negative 50. Okay. Would you please take out your interactive textbooks and turn to page 284 for me? 284. So let's take a look at what the directions tell us to do. Tell how much of a change occurred and circle whether it was positive or negative in each of the problems. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a look at each of the problems, and I want you to tell whether there was a positive or negative change and how much of a change occurred. When you're finished, what I'd like you to do is discuss your answers with your group members. Go.
It's negative? How?
Going down.
Oh.
So why? Explain to her why that's negative. What happened? So if there was a loss or a drop, or if it went down, that would be indicated by negative, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it's a negative drop.
How'd we do?
Good.
God, you guys are good. Fantastic. How'd we do over here?
I got 12.
Okay, are we ready? I need you to take your textbooks out and turn to page 551. We are going to actually talk about how we use negative integers in bar graphs. We're going to take a whole new look at bar graphs today. Okay, does everybody see the graph that's on page 551?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that graph is for a company called Crash Bang Entertainment. It's their income from 6 months, from September through February. And Crash Bang Entertainment actually makes video games. Who plays video games? That's what I thought. Okay, so they actually made video games, and we're going to take a look at this graph and see when they made money and when they lost money. You should see that in the months of September, December, and February, Crash Bang Entertainment actually made money. So if you look at the graph, you should see that everything above 0 would be what? Positive. It would be positive. And it's what color on the graph? Black. It's black, okay? And we also should notice that in the months of October, November, and January, they didn't make money. They actually did what?
They lost money.
They lost money. So everything below 0 shows a loss. And what color are the?
Red.
Red, and that would indicate what kind of numbers?
Negative.
Good job, guys. Okay, so when we say we're in the black, it means we're making a profit, which is good. When we say that we're in the red, it means that we're losing money, which is not so good. Okay, so Crash Bang went from $7 million in profit in September to $5 million loss in October. That's not very good. Okay. All right. So what I would like you to do now is open up your interactive textbooks to page 285.
Can you say the page number again?
I sure can. 285, bud. Okay, this is your problem-solving activity today. You are going to construct a bar graph based on the data in the table. You're going to include the necessary elements for a graph, which is a title, which is labels for the x and y axis. Who remembers what the x-axis is? Sloan?
It's the horizontal axis on the bottom.
Wonderful, that's right. It's the horizontal axis that goes across. And then you also have to label your y-axis, which goes where? Elizabeth?
The vertical up and down.
That's right, vertical, up and down. Okay? You also have to make sure that you have correct integer values on the vertical axis. Okay, let's take a look at what the page says. Al's Lawn and Yard Service mows lawn and does other yard work. Al's business makes different amounts of money depending on the time of year. He loses money during the winter when it's cold and when there's snow on the ground. So what does that mean when you lose money? Are we in the black or are we in the red?
Red.
Yes. So are we above or below 0?
Below.
Good job. While he has a few jobs, Al's business still loses money because what he pays his workers and what it costs to fix his equipment is more than what he makes during those months. So if you take a look to the right, there's a table, and that actually gives you each month and his monthly income. Your job is to take that information and create a bar graph. Okay? So remember, you have to indicate positive and negative integers on your bar graph. And I would like to hear you talking to your neighbors if you need some assistance with your bar graph, and you can always refer back to your textbook page 551 if you need to, okay? Okay, so go ahead and get started. Very good. Okay, what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to give you some colored pencils. I want you to go ahead and use your regular pencil to indicate the black, but I'm going to give you red colored pencils to use to indicate your red or your negative values, okay? Okay, Miss Reynolds.
Okay, Miss Randall.
I think we might have to use
What are
pink.
you doing for the numbers?
Just listen like that.
I have mine.
Start her.
Oh, there are my colored pencils.
Okay. Yeah.
Fantastic. You are welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. To make sure we have some sharpened pencils.
Fingers sharp.
You're welcome, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have a pencil sharpener?
Do I have a pencil sharpener? Well, it's a classroom. I should have a pencil sharpener, but I don't know where.
Oh, 100.
Okay, let's see. How about, I'm going to give you pink. Let's pretend it's red, okay? Did everyone get a colored pencil? Okay. Oops. I'm throwing pencils at you, young lady.
Okay, for this one,
Yeah.
when they're going into the negatives, like,
Yeah.
what do you want us to do?
Do you remember when we at the graph we just looked at? Your months are going to go across here, so where's your 0 going to be?
Now you.
Yeah. In the middle. So if you want to use as a reference the graph from the book on page 551, that might help.
Well, where'd you,
Sweetie, here we go. I think we've got enough. What in the world? Help me out here. Thank you, my dear. So did you all figure out where your 0 should go? That looks great. Now make sure that you label your X and Y axes, okay? I just have one question. How do we indicate, on a number line, how do we indicate that we're just below 0? So if we're 1 above, where would -1 be? Would it be all the way down at the bottom? Right below it. Okay, so I just want to take a look at your graph. This is labeled correctly, but I want you to think about how it should look when we look at our graph, okay? So kind of picture this graph if you flipped it upside down and you're trying to indicate -500. What should it look like? Do you remember the bar graph that we looked at in the example?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, so why don't let's erase these and let's draw a line across our graph to indicate where 0 is. And if you have to, flip it upside down and picture where your bar should go,
All right.
okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Because what does that actually show? It actually shows that he's making money and there's a growth.
Yeah.
So that's not really an accurate representation of what's happening, is it?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, same thing, sweetheart. If you look, that almost shows that he's making money, and what we're trying to show that he's not. So your graph looks fantastic, but you really should draw a line here and picture going down. And guys, it might be a good idea for you to open up your textbook and let's just take a look at the example that we did on page 551, because you'll be able to see how they did the graph. We want to make sure that if we're making a graph and we're showing negative numbers, that if this were my company and I were to take this to someone, they would say, are you crazy? Shows that you're making a lot of money. You don't need our help. Okay, so 551, I'm going our way.
Oh, I see.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, see, sweetie? Take a look. See, it's almost if you take this graph and you flip it upside down, look what's happened. Okay, so we're not going to start at the bottom and show that it's going up. We're trying to show a decrease. That's why 0 is in the middle of our graph. Good job. That looks very nice.
So I'm doing this right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. There's only one thing that I see that you might not have. What do you think it is? What are these?
Integers?
And they are the
Negatives?
income.
Oh, the income.
Make sure your axes are labeled. Because if I were just to see the graph and not know what it was about and it didn't say income and month, I might be confused, right? So that's why it's important. Mm-hmm. Yep. That looks wonderful. Now, you should, if you'd like to, for your visual, to use your colored pencil for the negative integers. Okay, guys, we have about 2 more minutes before we need to go over our homework for tonight. Okay. Make sure that you're talking with your groups, guys. I don't hear a lot of talking going on. Make sure that your neighbors are doing theirs correctly, okay? I want to hear what you have to say about positive and negative integers on a graph.
I'm not sure if I got it right.
Well, talk about it. Talk about why you think, okay, look at your graph and look at her graph and think about what might be missing and how this is labeled. Talk about it. And I want you to look at her graph and talk about how yours are different and what you might need to put on yours.
Like
Okay?
from negative 500 to 800?
Income your y-axis.
Okay, yeah, the different.
Where do you think that your month should go?
Negative 100. Just
On the bottom.
Probably on the bottom. But good job. You guys did a great job indicating your negative integers and the negative growth.
Like this should be less than that because it's a smaller negative.
Exactly. Think about the distance away from 0. Okay? So this is only 100 away from 0, where this is how far?
450.
That was a wonderful explanation for her. Yes, very good.
Would Alzon and Yard Services monthly income be a good title?
That's a wonderful title.
Okay.
And what would you label your X and Y axes?
The months
Mhm.
and his income.
Very good, exactly.
Yeah, you start at 0 and you go up.
Yes. We should hopefully all be finishing about the same time and we'll go over our homework. Okay, so make sure that you've compared your graphs. And guys, if you have a question, I really want to hear you talking to each other. Okay, make sure you're helping each other. Yes.
Is this good?
I don't know. Why don't you ask your neighbor?
We're good, right?
Yeah, we got the title for X, Y, X. We got the labels.
I think it looks pretty good. How do they compare?
They look pretty similar.
Yeah, we're good. Ours is the same.
Good. Now do you understand the difference between why your negatives should be below the 0 instead of above? And do you see how
Yeah, you're
different
right.
it looks?
It looked like they were all going
making
up.
money.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And how's your teammate Mark doing over here?
He,
Is he doing okay?
yes, you need to put the titles on the X and Y axis.
Good.
Like,
Yeah, I forgot about the title.
All right, guys, we're just about ready to wrap this up. Okay, I want want you guys to talk to each other right now quickly, and I want you to think about what you thought was most challenging about doing this particular graph versus other graphs that we've looked at.
This one was harder
I thought this part was
because I thought you had to
the labeling the axis, or not the axes, but the number. Scale. The scale. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
But other than that, it's pretty
You are so welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so somebody share with me, quickly, before we go over the homework and wrap up. Sierra, tell me what you thought was most challenging about this graph.
The most challenging for me was that I added from the previous one, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes. And can someone else give me another challenge that you ran into? Dylan, explain what you did on your graph.
I made the graph when you all get all the money, like a normal graph would be when it goes up. But now I learned that you have to draw a line and then go down and then go up.
Because we had to show the zero. Okay. We wanted to show our distance from zero, and what we were really doing is that we were showing our negative integers as positive integers almost, weren't we? Okay. Did anyone else run into that problem? You did also? Okay. That can be confusing, especially when you're doing a bar graph like that. Okay, guys, what I want you to do is go ahead and close your textbook and your interactive textbook, and let's take a look at our homework tonight. We actually have a front and back today. We have 2 pages, 552 and 553. Okay. The first activity that you have to do on tonight's homework is to complete the statements using the number line. So basically you're going to make the statement true. You're going to tell me, you're going to make sure make sure to copy the entire statement onto your paper. So if you look at the example, they showed you where positive 3 was, and then they subtracted 6 from. They wanted you to show that you're subtracting 6 to get to negative 3. So look at number 1. They're showing you negative 2, and they want you to indicate what you're subtracting from negative 2 to get to negative 4. Okay? So think about what we learned today with our integers. How far are the numbers from 0, and what are you really doing? Are you adding or are you subtracting to get the number? Okay, activity 2. Tell whether the change described in the problem is positive, A, or negative, B. So you're just going to write an A or a B on your paper to describe what has happened in the problem. Okay, so these are real-life examples. All you have to do is indicate whether the change is positive or negative. Any questions on that part? Okay. On activity 3, there's a bar graph. It looks a lot like the one that we made, doesn't it? Okay, we see that when we're in the positive, we're in the what? And when we're in the negative, we're in the red. Okay, so you can see both on this graph, can't you? So you're going to use the bar graph that you see to answer the questions that follow that. Any questions on activity 3? Okay, and remember, activity 4 is always our distributed practice, and you're going to be converting some percents to fractions and working with decimals and doing some addition of decimals and fractions. Do you have any questions, guys? Hey, good job today. Okay, you can go ahead and pack up and get ready to go to your next class.